Okay, so today we're going to discuss conspiracy thinking in light of what is going on with COVID 19 and a lot of the conspiracy videos that I've been getting sent my way or I've seen pop up on my Facebook or Twitter feed or something. And the amount of conspiracy thinking around me, from some of the people I know to people that I talk to on social media, is startling. So, what I wanted to do was a deep dive into conspiracy thinking and the psychology behind it. So let's just dive right in. So in the beginning, of a conspiracy theory, when it's initially laid out and you're listening to it, the human mind, when they hear these stories, we have evolved a perfect mind for detecting patterns. We almost have a superpower when it comes to detecting patterns. It's so well refined that we will create patterns where there might not be any patterns. And that is the main foundation of a conspiracy theory, is you have to put together the pattern that the conspiracy theory is laying out, and then you can piece together the story to have it to make sense to you. And there's a few kind of biases and actions at play here in the mind. One, you have confirmation bias. This is probably the most persuasive cognitive bias that we know of. It's when you give more weight to evidence that already supports your stance, your beliefs. And so when you hear a conspiracy theory, if it's a conspiracy theory that is lending itself to something that is bolstering something you kind of already believe, you're more prone to believe it. Confirmation bias is working wonders in your mind as you listen to these conspiracies. Another one is called the proportionality bias. So we have a tendency to assume that big events, something as big as a pandemic like COVID-19 that's sweeping the globe and killed over 80,000 Americans already. This is a huge event. So the proportionality bias tells us that big events have big causes, and a big cause would be somebody or a group of somebodies behind the scenes pulling the strings, causing these big events to take place. Another one at play, sometimes this is probably the least of the three that is at play, but it's definitely in play, is projection. So projection is when you do something yourself, or you have some sort of trait about yourself, and you are calling it out on somebody else, and it's not really there, and you're projecting your own insecurities, your own biases, your own doubts, your own whatever it may be onto someone else when it's not really present. So this relates to conspiracy theories in a way that sometimes some of these people may be people that are prone to gossip. They may be people who have trust issues, and they engage in conspiratorial behaviors themselves. So when they hear a conspiracy theory, it kind of resonates with them, and they're projecting their own tendencies right into the conspiracy theory itself. Like I said, this is probably the least of these three that takes place the most. Obviously, confirmation bias is numero uno here, but it definitely is part of the problem. Now that takes us to the 5 components that make up a good conspiracy theory. A conspiracy theory that is really infecting a lot of minds. So a really strong conspiracy theory, generally most of them have all 5 of these, but a good one will have patterns. They will have patterns that are in the story that are easily connecting. You can kind of connect the dots and piece together the puzzle, and it doesn't take much effort. but there by no doubt is going to be things that are missing from the pattern. There's going to be things that are missing from the puzzle that are, you can't invalidate it. And that's what makes a conspiracy so hard to contend with, to try to falsify, is that there are aspects of it that are damn near unfalsifiable. Similar to the fact that, I can't prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's no Easter Bunny. But we all know, or at least live our lives like there really is no Easter Bunny. The next component would be agency. So agency is when you have a group of somebodies or some person that is behind the scenes, and there's some sort of, they have agency, they have control over the story. It's not just, a virus that is not alive and is sweeping the globe mindlessly, and there's no, it doesn't care what age you are, what color you are, what sex you are. It doesn't care what part of the globe you live in. It's nothing like that. There's agency behind it. So there's someone or some group behind the conspiracy that is controlling it, they have agency over it. And then the third component is coalitions. So the coalition, comes down to, the powerful coalition. You name it. You have the U.S. government. You have the deep state. You have the Jews. You have the Illuminati. The coalitions behind the scenes, pulling the strings, they're the ones that are the agents of the conspiracy. And generally, the more powerful of whatever's going on, the more powerful the coalition that is pulling the strings behind the scenes of the conspiracy. Fourth component would be threat. There's got to be some sort of level of threat from this coalition that makes the conspiracy seem far more insidious, far more, believable. It really sinks into people's minds when there's some sort of threat of danger behind the conspiracy, because, well, it's dangerous. Again, our evolutionary mind kicks in, and something that is dangerous, one, we want to find out how to stay safe from it. We want to find out how we can defend against it. But it also makes the story so much more intriguing if there's a threat behind the conspiracy. And then 5, probably the one that everyone knows, is secrecy. There's got to be some level of secrecy. Smoke-filled back rooms in the shadows, the Illuminati. There's some sort of secrecy that only a select few know about the conspirators, about the conspiracy, and it's a secret society. And this, again, lends itself to a great story. Stories are the best way to really drive home a point. Stories are the best way to really help other people understand your point of view. They're far superior to just, doling out facts. If you can tell a good story and it resonates with people, you're going to really win in getting your message across far better than someone who's just trying to throw out facts. So those are the 5 components: patterns, agency, coalitions, threats, and secrecy. And knowing all those, knowing the biases that we discussed in the beginning, all of it is like a perfectly baked cake is COVID-19. It's perfect. And this is why it's just working just magic on people's minds in terms of conspiracy thinking. But it's also shows you why conspiracy thinking is so dangerous. It's so detrimental to a society, and what makes it far more worse today than it did in the past is social media. It spreads like wildfire, one post on any platform, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever it may be, and it can go viral. And, in a day, millions of people could have seen it, and maybe 10 million people saw it. And it infected 1 million people. And that's just in one day. And we're talking about then those 1 million people, they go around and, each person knows, roughly probably 100 or so people. And then it just keeps spreading and spreading and spreading. And then on top of that, what makes them so difficult to contend with is it takes so much more effort. It takes so much more heavy lifting. It takes so much more time to systematically go through the claims of a conspiracy theory and try to figure out if there's any truth behind them. That takes a lot more time, a lot more effort. And we know that, once the conspiracy's out there, it's very difficult to contend with correcting for it, with making a correction collectively for everyone who has heard it. It's already making its way around, and the people trying to debunk it have to spend so much more time and effort doing so. And top it all off, you have to try to then change the person's mind who's already been subdued by the conspiracy. And we all know that changing people's minds is very difficult, and that takes even more time. So the best way to fight them really is stop spreading them. One, as I think it's a fundamental failure of our education system, especially in particular in this country, because conspiracies, I'm not sure, I'm not privy to anything in other countries, but it seems like in America there's a whole nother level of conspiracy thinking that people just run away with, and it seems like a failure of our education system to really understand critical thinking and how to validate claims and what's a sound argument, and how to argue in general, what's a valid statement, and how to do research properly and go to the sources and see if any of what you're hearing holds up. It's much easier to hear it, be intrigued by it. You go on Facebook, you spread it around, and then all of a sudden, 7 or 8 people saw it and they all believe it. And like I said, in COVID-19's case, it's killing people. It's literally killing people. There are people who believe that the pandemic is some sort of hoax one way or another. And they are out and about and have been going out and about and not taking proper precautions, whatever that may be, whether washing their hands or wearing a mask, or not, if they own a place of business, not social distancing properly. And it's killing people. It's leading people to spread the disease further and wider, and eventually that disease finds itself into someone who isn't so fortunate and isn't strong enough immune-wise to fight it off, and they die. And you're also making the job of medical professionals, doctors and nurses, so much more difficult, because there are people, again, who buy into this conspiracy and they get sick and they end up in the hospital when, if they weren't infected with such a conspiracy, they may not have end up sick and ended up in the hospital. And then the resources, the PPE, the labor has to go to them to keep them alive. And then perhaps someone else who took it seriously is unfortunately just gets sick. And now there's less labor, there's less PPE to go around, and maybe it leads them to their grave. In this instance, with COVID-19, there's patterns to these conspiracy stories. You name it. The pandemic one is a perfect example of patterns, starting from where she talks about how her life was destroyed and they were out to get her, and the FBI sat on the evidence and they didn't go to trial, and it's Fauci's behind it. You can build all these patterns up in the story. Agency, you have the deep state, you have the FBI, you have the CIA sitting on the evidence and keeping her, holding her against her will and not allowing her constitutional rights. Coalition, well, the coalition is the deep state. It is Fauci. It is the agents who run big pharma, who are trying to keep everyone in the dark. The threat is the disease itself. The disease itself is a threat that is lending itself to kill people. And then secrecy. The secrecy comes into, it's done behind the scenes by, in this instance, in pandemic, by Big Pharma and Fauci. And it's a secret society that they have going on, and they're making millions of dollars off their vaccines, and they're making people sick all over the world so they can get money. And it's so secret that there's no evidence for it, but this one strange woman, Judy, speaking out about it, and she has claims that are completely unfalsifiable. So you see where all 5 of these components come into play in this conspiracy, and then you throw on the biases of the human mind. You throw on the fact that we are evolutionarily ingrained to create patterns so well that we will build one where there isn't one. Then you throw in confirmation bias, which everyone has. And if you're not aware that it's there and you're not aware that it's playing on your mind, then it's just running amok. It infects us all, but at least if you know it's there and you know it's at play, you can kind of guard against it. And then the proportionality bias is obviously, this is a huge event, and huge events take huge causes. And it's just, this has to come to an end. This is like one of my crusades, is to help people stop spreading and believing these conspiracies, whatever they may be. 9/11 truthers, this COVID-19, the Illuminati, whatever else you got out there. And it doesn't mean to say that there aren't certain conspiracies at the time. They were a conspiracy, like Watergate or Iran-Contra. Right? These were conspiracies at the time. But when it becomes no longer a conspiracy and it's just a factual story, because evidence comes to light, and then they are proven to have actually gone on. But when years and years and years go on, and a lot of these conspiracies like the moon landing and stuff like that, and the things that are said about them are not validated in the conspiracy, or you can actually systematically go through the conspiracy and prove as to why what they're saying doesn't make any sense. So, it's scary, because part of these conspiracies is a way of thinking that lends itself to other, insidious ways of thinking that can be harmful to societies at large. And I'm all for like Facebook and YouTube, being their private companies. If they can do their fact checking and they can get their fact checking in order, and they want to take down certain conspiracies that are unfounded, by all means, please, because it seems to me that, one, they're full within their purview to do so. Two, there are a large portion of people that they don't have the mental capabilities to defend themselves from these bogus claims. And then they go out and spread these bogus claims further, and then they go out and they turn these ideas and they act on them. They vote on them. And then their votes turn into elected officials who may placate them, and end up the ideas end up flowing through society so completely that they become actions and laws and people in places of power. So